My phone died after the 57th missed call. I found it face down on my kitchen table, screen black, rain tapping the windows of my house in Napa Valley. The silence should have felt peaceful. It felt like the eye of a hurricane. Then the doorbell rang. Once, twice, a third time, insistent. "Dad, please, I know you're in there." My son, the same son who, 2 hours earlier, told me I wasn't welcome at his own wedding. My name is Richard Collins. I'm 62 years old. And if life has taught me one lesson, it's this. The people who can break your heart the fastest are the ones you spent your whole life protecting. That morning had started like any other Saturday. Coffee before sunrise, fog drifting over the vineyards I'd built from nothing. My wife Emily used to say, the vines looked like green waves frozen in time. She'd been gone 22 years. Cancer doesn't care how good a person you are. After she died, my son Daniel became my whole world. Every recital, every game, every scraped knee. I was there. I turned down business trips, skipped vacations, because he mattered more. I never regretted a single sacrifice. Not until today. Around 10 that morning, I called him about the wedding, just to ask what time he needed me there. The silence on the other end told me something was wrong before he said a word. "Dad," he finally said, "I don't think you should come to the wedding." I laughed, because it sounded impossible. Then he said it plainly. Melissa didn't want me there. She thought I'd embarrass them. His voice nearly disappeared when he added her exact words, that I was an embarrassment. I'd built one of Northern California's largest independent wine distribution companies, negotiated in New York, Paris, Chicago, given away millions without asking for my name on a single building, and somehow, I wasn't refined enough for her family. "Is this Melissa talking?" I asked quietly. "Or is it you?" He didn't answer. Silence tells the truth. Words try to hide it. 1 week earlier, I'd stood with Daniel and Melissa under the oak trees overlooking the valley and handed them the deed to one of Napa's most beautiful vineyards, $7.9 million, a wedding gift, not because they asked, but because I wanted them to build a future. Melissa had cried in my arms. "We don't deserve you," she'd said. 7 days later, I apparently wasn't good enough to sit in the front row of their wedding. "I hope you have a beautiful wedding," I told him, and hung up. No yelling, no accusations. I set the phone down and walked into my study, where 35 years of photographs lined the walls. Daniel learning to ride a bike, camping trips after Emily died, the boy who used to think I could fix anything. I sat there almost 2 hours. When I finally turned my phone over, it had 57 missed calls. Daniel, Melissa, her parents, the wedding planner, strangers. I hadn't read a single message before the doorbell rang. It wasn't Daniel at the door. It was Margaret Hayes, my attorney of 25 years. "May I come in?" She sat at my kitchen table with a leather folder she didn't open right away. "I'm sorry," she said. "I received several calls." Then, Melissa's father sounded desperate. Desperate. 2 hours ago I was the embarrassment. Now people were desperate. Something had shifted, though I didn't yet know what. Margaret finally opened the folder and slid a printed email across the table. One Melissa had meant to send to a bridesmaid, but accidentally copied to half the wedding party, including the attorney still looped in from the vineyard paperwork. Can you believe Richard actually thought he'd sit in the front row? He'd ruin the whole atmosphere. Daniel agrees it's better if he stays home. Besides, once the vineyard paperwork is finished, we won't have to pretend anymore. I read the last line 3 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to believe I had. "I suppose," I said quietly, "I finally know what they think of me." "You know what Melissa thinks," Margaret said. "I'm not convinced Daniel believes all of it." Then she placed a second document in front of me, the original purchase agreement for the vineyard. The transfer to Daniel had never been finalized. For tax reasons, we'd structured it so the property still technically belonged to my company, Collins Legacy Holdings, until the final trust paperwork went through after the honeymoon. Legally, the vineyard, where the wedding reception was scheduled for tomorrow, still belonged to me. "What do you want to do?" Margaret asked. I walked the hallway of family photos before answering. Emily once told me, after Daniel lied about breaking a neighbor's window, "Don't punish him because you're angry. Teach him because you love him." Maybe I'd spent so many years protecting him from consequences that he never learned where entitlement begins. I don't want revenge, I finally said. I don't want to humiliate anyone. I want them to understand that generosity isn't weakness, and respect isn't optional. The wedding could happen anywhere they chose. They just weren't free to celebrate on property that wasn't theirs. Margaret typed quietly, notifying the venue. No threats, no lawsuits, just the truth. When she finished, she looked up. It's done. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. That night my phone buzzed with texts from unknown numbers. Please answer, it's urgent. Your son has no idea what's about to happen. Something told me the hardest part of this story hadn't started yet. I barely slept, turning over the same question. When had my son stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as an obstacle? By 6:30 the next morning, I was on my porch with black coffee, watching the fog roll over vines that didn't care about weddings. My phone rang. Daniel. For the first time, I answered. Dad, thank God. I know. They won't let us into the vineyard. Did you do this? I asked my attorney to delay the transfer. You canceled my wedding. I canceled nothing. The ceremony's still happening. Our reception was scheduled on property that legally belongs to me. In the background, I heard Melissa shouting that this was my fault. When Daniel came back on the line, his voice had changed. Dad, please, I need you. Those 3 words nearly broke me. For a second, I wasn't talking to a 34-year-old man. I was hearing the boy who used to climb into my lap after nightmares. Do you need me? I asked quietly. Or do you need my vineyard? He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. An hour later, Margaret called with updates. Caterers with nowhere to unload. Musicians packing up. Guests asking questions. I never wanted innocent people caught in the middle, I said. I know, she replied, but gossip travels faster than paperwork. At noon, a wedding planner named Susan called, exhausted, asking if I'd truly intended for this to happen. No, I told her. I intended to keep a promise to myself, that I'd never reward disrespect. She was quiet a long moment, then said she didn't think I was the villain everyone imagined. That afternoon I drove into town for groceries. An elderly couple stopped me. Frank Donovan, a man who'd worked my harvests decades earlier. His father's saying stuck with me the rest of the day. If someone is ashamed of the hand that fed them, they're probably not hungry enough yet. When I got home, 3 black SUVs sat outside my gate. Melissa's parents, Harold and Cynthia Brooks. For the first time since I'd known him, Harold looked uncomfortable. We knew Melissa wanted a smaller guest list, Cynthia admitted on my patio, but we didn't know she'd told Daniel to exclude you. Harold rubbed his forehead. Our daughter admitted she wrote those emails. I raised her better than this. For the first time all day, I realized I wasn't the only parent grieving. Then a black sedan came up the driveway too fast. Daniel got out, tuxedo jacket gone, tie loose, eyes bloodshot. Nothing like the confident groom from the day before. He looked like a frightened boy. Dad, can we please talk? Harold and Cynthia excused themselves to the car. The patio went quiet except for wind through the vines. I'm sorry, Daniel started. For what? For yesterday, for everything. Tell me exactly what you're apologizing for, I said. Not because today went badly, because you understand. Why? It went badly. He was quiet a long time. Then, I chose the easy path. I knew Melissa didn't want you there. I knew it was wrong. I told myself it was one day, that after the wedding, everything would go back to normal. He laughed bitterly. I was lying to myself. When did you stop standing up for the person who always stood up for you? His eyes filled with tears. I don't know. We walked to the old oak tree where, at 7 years old, he'd buried his mother's ring box, convinced squirrels would steal it. Even now, we managed a small laugh. Then I told him what Emily had said before she died, that she worried I'd confuse protecting him with rescuing him, that someday he'd need to learn love doesn't mean saying yes to everything. Did you ever plan to actually give us the vineyard? He asked. Son, I spent $7.9 million. I don't pretend at that price. He handed me his phone, months of texts from Melissa. Your dad always makes everything about himself. He'll tell those boring stories again. Once the transfer's done, we won't have to keep pretending. You knew, I said, and you still defended her. I thought marriage meant supporting your spouse. Not when your spouse asks you to betray your family. Just then, another car arrived. Melissa, still in her ruined wedding dress, makeup streaked, stepped out furious. You humiliated us, she said, pointing at me. You destroyed our wedding over your ego. Daniel turned to her. No, my father didn't destroy anything. She stared at him, stunned. You're taking his side. I'm taking the side of what's right. He looked at her, and something in his voice had finally hardened. What did we actually build? A marriage that begins by excluding my father. Melissa turned to me, quieter now. What I wanted was to sit in the front row. I wanted my father there. That's all. That's what I wanted too, I said. You didn't care enough to ask. She had no answer. Minutes later, she drove away. No slammed door, no scene, just gone. Daniel stayed until sunset. Before he left, he stopped by his truck. Would you have answered if I hadn't come here myself? I don't know. I guess I deserve that. He started the engine, then rolled the window down. I love you. He hadn't said those words in years. I love you too, son, I told him, and watched him drive off. Not with certainty, but with hope. Sometimes that's enough to begin again. By Monday, half of Napa Valley had heard some version of the story, that I was a ruthless millionaire or that lawyers had manipulated me, or worse. None of it was true. I let people believe what they wanted and focused on what I could control. I called Margaret. I don't want the vineyard sitting in the company forever, I told her. I want to change the plan. Over the following weeks, we built something different. Not a simple gift, but a family trust. Daniel would eventually inherit the vineyard, but only through responsibility, financial education, community service, real participation in the business, annual reviews with independent trustees. If he became the owner one day, it would be because he'd become the kind of man capable of protecting what generations before him had built, not simply because he was my son. 3 weeks later, Daniel called. Not for money, not about the vineyard, just breakfast. We met at the old diner where we used to eat every Saturday of his childhood. We talked for 3 hours about his mother, the Thanksgiving turkey she burned teaching neighborhood kids to make ornaments, the way she danced barefoot in the kitchen to Sinatra, her promise that success should never make us forget ordinary people. Daniel wiped away a tear. I've spent so much time chasing the life I thought I wanted. I forgot the life she wanted for me. A month after that, we walked the vineyard together, without mentioning ownership once. I taught him how to judge healthy vines, why patience matters more than speed. Near the oak tree, he told me he'd started seeing a counselor. I realized I've spent my adult life trying to impress people, he said, and the one person whose respect I already had was the one I stopped appreciating. As for Melissa, about 2 months after the wedding that never happened, she and Daniel ended their engagement. No dramatic fight, no courtroom battle, just the quiet realization that they wanted different futures. I don't hate her. Hatred is too heavy to carry for long. I only hope she learns what my son eventually did. That character always outlasts appearance. Last spring, that same vineyard hosted something far more meaningful than any reception. We held a charity harvest festival for veterans, first responders, teachers, and families facing hardship. Daniel organized the entire event himself, worked beside employees he used to overlook, shook every volunteer's hand, thanked every donor personally. Late that afternoon, I watched him help an elderly veteran into a chair and serve him lunch. No cameras, no applause, just quiet kindness. That's when I understood something. The greatest inheritance I could ever leave my son wasn't a vineyard. It was another chance to become the man I always believed he could be. Sometimes life doesn't give us what we deserve. It gives us the chance to earn it, because someone loved us enough to let us try. If this story reminded you that relationships are worth more than pride, carry that with you. If there's someone you've been meaning to call, forgive, or simply thank, don't wait for a wedding, a funeral, or a crisis. Life moves faster than we expect.